citation accordingly.
Okay. Ashley Beavers, 6803 Glen Allen Avenue. Good morning. I am a concerned parent who spoke last month regarding how the DEI lessons made my child feel. Some of the statements she said were, "Why do I feel guilty for being white when it's beyond my control? I feel like I have to be a chameleon in the classroom." With public comment opportunity, I expressed my concerns and gave my child's perspective. I expected a response from the school because my child matters, regardless of what support you have for this training, but no one reached out. I want you to know that one of the next year's lessons is LGBTQIA, coupled with sexuality. Defined by Merriam-Webster Dictionary, it states, the quality or state of being sexual, the condition of having sex, sexual activity, expression of sexual receptivity or interest, especially when excessive. How is this appropriate? It's not. It's not appropriate in any capacity. Why are you allowing the PTA to head this topic to our children? Or are you going to allow sexuality to be defined by some unknown group, like what you did with systematic racism? This is not part of the school curriculum. I want it on the record that I emailed Mr. Bolden on Tuesday and the assistant principal Frazier about both my concerns with sexuality lesson for this year and have received no response. I want to remind the school board of its duty. According to the School Boards Association, the most important responsibility of the school board is to employ a superintendent and hold them responsible for managing the schools. You help set district policy, adopting curriculum, engaging parents. You're supposed to build public support and lead the public in demanding quality education. In my opinion, you're not doing that. You're supposed to serve as a link between schools and the public. As Erin Short wrote in her 2020 letter basically labeling all white parents racist, I'll use her statement. When parents come to you with concerns, are you going to keep your head in the sand? Your job is elected. You can be voted out for not doing your job. When parents come to you, you aren't supposed to brush it off and let Fred deal with it. You're supposed to engage. You aren't doing your job. I want you to know that I and a growing number of parents have started taking charge due to your lack of action. This flyer went out to the community over the weekend. It's original documents that were given to students during the DEA training in Erin's letter. With that said, I'm sure they will make a decision on whether or not you should keep your job. But don't worry, the board meetings and hours were included so they too can express their feelings on the matter. I expect a response from the staff I emailed at a minimum when it concerns my child. Members of the board, please engage your parents and address the concerns. Otherwise, it will be taken to the community. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jordan Klein. I'm at 32750 Aspen Glen Drive. I'm an incoming sophomore at the high school and a member of the diversity committee. In middle school, I started to learn about discrimination and social justice by reading books like The Hate You Give, Dear Martin, and All American Boys, and I had discussions with classmates. I realized I wanted to make a difference, and over the past few years, I've engaged in various learning opportunities. I'm very fortunate to be a student at Solon, not only because the extracurriculars and academics are excellent, but also because there are people with many different backgrounds. The diversity at Solon is one of its top qualities. I have friends in many races, religions, and ethnicities. Learning about their cultures and traditions makes me more informed and a better friend. As a Jewish person myself, I truly appreciate when my friends ask me questions about my religion and culture. As a white student, I understand that the school needs to teach me about diversity and equity. I do not feel threatened when learning about systemic racism and the fact that white people traditionally benefit from policies and have throughout history. I believe learning is a key first step toward ensuring that everyone in society has these benefits. I do not feel uncomfortable or guilty when discussing these issues. I feel empowered to make a difference. When I talk with my friends after the classroom conversations, they agree that these discussions are critical and they appreciate that we can have these in the school setting. The conversations open our mind to the world, especially after hearing statistics about unfair treatment and inequity. It's also important to note that the DEI lessons do not only cover the topic of racism, but also other topics or other issues that face teens, such as religion, xenophobia, and ableism. We learn to be accepting of differences and to advocate for those who can't necessarily advocate for themselves. I believe it is vital to continue these conversations at school as they help students understand each other and therefore have a more positive high school experience. And today's students are tomorrow's local and national leaders, so it's important to learn now. I hope the Board of Education continues its commitment to DEI education. Thank you. And my apologies for leaving the meeting early, but I have to go to band camp.
My name is Katie Egan, and I live at 6958 Psalm Center Road. I'm the parent of 3 Roxbury students and have been an intervention specialist for Northeast Ohio Urban School District for 10 years. The first thing I would like to say is thank you for your incredible work through the first 2 months of virtual learning in April through June 2020. Your connection to students and communication with families was efficient and above and beyond. My job during those months was just attempting to connect with families and solidify phone numbers, addresses, and email addresses. I was not teaching. I was just trying to communicate important information to parents. Parent involvement and willingness for connection is taken for granted. It is not the norm everywhere. I thank you for your commitment to communication in a time of crisis. With that being said, it seems as though family was not as important to connect to when introducing borderline controversial subject matter in school this year. The concealing of curriculum written by a small group of parents and admin was at the forefront of the agenda, even though families repeatedly asked for access to the curriculum. I may not have a high school student yet, but that's only a few short years away. My confidence in transparency and union between school and home is dwindling. If families who want to be involved and a partner with the school are being rejected, what does that tell the students? It tells them that division with family is normal. Dividing student against parent when it comes to a curriculum that boasts inclusion is contradictory. I ask that moving forward, families be presented with curriculum surrounding DEI ahead of time, preferably at curriculum night in the fall. I also ask that the program be considered an opt-in instead of an opt-out. Though many of the principles of the DEI encourage much-needed bias-changing conversation, the way it has been presented this past year at the high school has created division. Many of the vocabulary terms have isolated students and caused fractures in student unity. At the last school board meeting, several residents attested to the fact that this curriculum was written due to student survey results. It was stated that students overwhelmingly wanted the DEI program, but 54 students asked for changes to be made, and 18 said they didn't like it at all. Only 3 out of the 184 students who made comments said they liked the curriculum as is. Nearly 40% of the comments suggested changes needed to be made to the curriculum. Students should not have to feel isolated by opting out, but instead all students should be given the choice to opt in. I also wanted to touch on the point of not engaging with families, doing to keep the conversations organic. Working for a school district that has adopted an inquiry-based method of teaching and learning, organic conversation is not had after a 45-minute prepared presentation. That presentation then skews the conversation with bias instead of posing an open-ended question or photo that sparks authentic conversation between students. Working for that same district, we could benefit from an open conversation about unity. These presentations may hold some value in promoting that. But at the last meeting, it was shared that Solon does not want this good work by the PTA and admin stolen from other districts. If the point of the curriculum is changing cultural bias, why keep it a secret? If the information is so crucial, why can't families in other districts see it? In closing, I ask that family be considered as the child's most important educator and that we be given the opportunity to know what our children are learning. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Melissa Solano. I live at 7071 Liberty Road, and I'm coming to you somewhat with a personal. I'm a mother of Spanish children. My sister's children are Black. We have a multiracial family. And we moved to Solon a few years ago, and the shocking thing with me is the more training and diversity I'm seeing come from this neighborhood, the more separation and division is going on in this neighborhood. All you have to do is look in the community groups and look how the adults are treating each other because of this. What is that going to do to the children if the adults are so offended by this and are fighting back and forth? It's something we should really think about. So my family, we're multiracial, and for the longest time, it was going forward. Now it's all this hate and division. What is going on? This is not how it was. And so I have to go to work, but I just wanted to say, look around at what this is doing to our community. People's houses are getting vandalized. Yeah, 5 people in this neighborhood, houses have been vandalized. Okay? We have got to stop this. This is getting ridiculous. So that's it. I have to go. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Wadd. I'm at 31135 Cannon Road. I'm just here on a separate note to voice my support for a mask mandate for students that are under 12, mostly because they're all ineligible for the vaccine, so that they don't have that added protection of being able to get the vaccine. And with the Delta variant right now, we are seeing that COVID is over 200% more transmissible, and that it is causing young people to get sicker than they were previously. And these masks in schools for children that are unvaccinated would be their first line of protection. We're also seeing a lot of breakthrough cases. So people that are vaccinated are getting sick due to the Delta variant. So masking children that are unvaccinated would also help protect vaccinated and unvaccinated staff as well. I do think we owe it to our staff to keep them safe, and being in a large building with a bunch of unvaccinated children is not the best way to keep them safe. It would also protect students that are at higher risk of COVID, as well as their family members and their siblings, as is the case in my house. I do have a son who is at higher risk for COVID, and I'm concerned about his sister bringing it home to him if she's in a building with unmasked children. And lastly, the CDC and the AAP recommend masking for all children under 12 due to their inability to get the vaccine. So thank you for considering all of that information, and I appreciate your time.
My name is Jennifer. I live at 31809 South Roundhead.
Your last name, please.
Oh, Emarino, sorry. About a month ago, we all watched in horror as the condos in Florida collapsed, only to find that the owners of the condo had known for years that the building's infrastructure was severely damaged and needed repair. But rather than address the issue head on, they decided to ignore it, and it resulted in devastating consequences. Right now in this country, we are seeing our infrastructure start to collapse. The average life expectancy for a trans woman of color is 35 years old. That is a crumbling infrastructure. We have seen over 360 voter suppression bills introduced into legislation over the past year. That is a crumbling infrastructure. On average, less than 10% of class time is dedicated to Black history, and only 8% of graduating seniors can identify slavery as the root cause of the Civil War. Hate violent crimes have hit a 16-year high in this country, all examples of crumbling infrastructure. We can no longer look away and hope things will just magically get better on their own. After growing up in a predominantly white community and attending a largely white high school and college, I have learned a lot this past year that was never taught to me in my school. At no point in my quest for knowledge did I choose to feel sorry for myself or encourage my children to hate themselves or this country because of the problems we face in society. I chose to take the mindset of listening, learning, and trying to do what I could do to help. Every child that walks into the DEI classroom is allowed that choice of what they want to do with the information presented. So let's stop pretending that we are making white kids feel bad about themselves is anywhere close to a valid argument. The fact that anyone would feel that their child shouldn't learn how to be more compassionate, understanding, and accepting, or that other children should continue to walk through their lives feeling discriminated against, misunderstood, or excluded simply because it might make their child feel a bit uncomfortable in the learning process is all the evidence we need of how vital these classes are, and probably further evidence that we need them for many adults as well. Understanding our history, understanding the cultures, lifestyles, and ideologies of our neighbors, colleagues, fellow students, and friends doesn't have the power to make us hate ourselves or this country. These classrooms aren't indoctrination, they are information. Information that the student body overwhelmingly asked for, which should be the beginning and the ending of this debate. If we are going to fix the crumbling infrastructure, we need to do it by working together, by listening when people say there is a problem, by accepting that maybe we don't always have the answers, and allowing the space for everyone to grow stronger. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Lee Hall. I live at 7102 Fox Hill Drive in Solon. I want to begin by putting on record what I'm sure you already know, that boards of education have become ground zero for the fight to silence the racial justice movement born in the wake of George Floyd's murder. I ask you to remain strong in the face of the well-funded, well-organized, ruthless misinformation campaign being waged against our public schools. This movement is not narrowly tailored to some newly identified threat. Rather, it is a ruthlessly broad overreaction that seeks to silence and even criminalize all conversation about race, including long-standing, widely accepted cultural competency and diversity concepts. After the murder of George Floyd, I heard the call to learn about institutional instructional racism and what it means to be anti-racist. As an attorney and a social worker, I thought I had a good understanding of these issues. I quickly realized I only had a surface-level understanding, and I learned about the structural and institutional racism that creates real, measurable differences in life outcomes. As a white person, my response to this learning was not to hate myself or other white people. It was to hate the system, and I felt motivated to see it changed. School districts across the country, including Solon, had the same reaction I had. They felt compelled to better understand what was happening and to do something to help support their staff, students, and communities. In Erin Short's June 11, 2020 email, she said, "I believe our country is at a tipping point when it comes to race relations, and I also believe schools need to take a leadership role in helping students and families have honest and open conversations about race." I felt so grateful for this email. She got it, and I felt comforted to know that my students attended school in a district that got it. As a country, the cognitive dissonance between our ideals and our actions continues. So does the fight to resolve it. Providing our children with the education required to understand systemic and institutional racism will prepare them to be engaged citizens and future leaders. Casting this education as anti-white racism that targets individual people and not systems is disingenuous at best. Come on, let's give our children credit for being able to learn hard things. The DEI curriculum was being developed well before the pandemic and George Floyd's murder. As people have already mentioned, it started in response to students reporting that they were experiencing racism at school. And if nothing else, this matters. We asked, and our children told us what they needed. They asked us to work to become anti-racist. I ask you to continue to support this effort. And I'm just responding also, because I have a few seconds left, to the first woman who spoke, because I am the parent of a pansexual child, and so I appreciate the inclusion of LGBTQ curriculum and appreciate that you've included it. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm George Dent. I live at 32105 Woodsdale Lane. I agree with those who have objected to the use of critical race theory and other radical racial doctrines in our schools. With my limited time, I will focus on the anti-racism glossary of terms that was given to students and only later was made available to parents. It's highly objectionable in many ways. Because of time limits, I will focus on just two of them. One is the definition of white fragility. This is said to trigger the outward display of emotions such as anger and behaviors such as argumentation. In other words, if you're irate about what you feel is a distorted and divisive treatment of race and respond by disagreeing, you are guilty of white fragility. Apparently, the only permissible response is abject acquiescence. Well, I think that open debate is not fragility. It is a sign of freedom and of a vigorous democracy. Second is white privilege, which is often humiliating for white children, and I believe intended to humiliate them. This is outrageous. America today is the least racist major country in the world. Black people are freer and more prosperous in America than in any other country in the world. Do not take my word for this. Look at the behavior of black people and other people of color. Yes, millions of them are trying to cross our border. But you notice they're all trying to get in. They are not trying to get out. Now, if the people who are propagating this anti-racism glossary of terms really meant what they say, they would be standing on our borders telling all these would-be immigrants, turn around, you're making a terrible mistake, this is a terrible racist country, go somewhere else. In fact, they are encouraging people to come here. Why do they come here? One of the microaggressions that we are not supposed to utter is that America is the land of opportunity. Why in the world are all these immigrants trying to come here? They are looking for opportunity, an opportunity that is more available to them in America than any other country in the world. So, to the extent that any of us should have, now I realize I did not write the Declaration of Independence, you didn't write it, so I can't take credit for it, but okay, I'm sorry, my time is up. I ask that the board act on my request to eliminate this glossary of terms as soon as possible, to apologize to the community for its having been put out, and to issue a statement explaining the problems with this glossary and stating what is going to be done to change it. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Broadbent. I'm here for a second time with Protect Ohio Children. I wish we had a lot more time to discuss the subject of critical race theory, comprehensive sexuality education, and social emotional learning, all three of which I have feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose. I've spent the last...
If you could state your address, please.
My address is 3362 Belvoir Boulevard, Beechwood. I have immersed myself in historical learning of critical theory, the Franklin School, and the origins of the belief systems and learning and curriculum associated with, among other things, critical race theory. I think it bears a brief recap of circumstances and how we got to the point where we're having this back and forth discussion. At some morning earlier this year, Solon School and Solon School Board and Superintendent discovered that there's systemic racism. At the same time, major sports franchises and several major corporations in America all discovered the same thing. And interestingly, all discovered that there's one resource to go to address this systemic racism. I'll focus just exclusively, excuse me, on CRT this morning because it seems to be a very hot button issue in Solon exclusively. Solon, among all school districts in the country, seems to have adopted unheard of resources in order to address the systemic racism that was discovered earlier this year. The problem I believe that you're facing is that parents were not communicated with, teachers were ineffectively communicated with, and students don't understand it. So my volunteer organization, and no, we're not well funded, and we have very little money. We're just people that are passionate about our kids and our communities and public school and education. We are being inundated with calls from teachers and students. One of them from a Solon upper school student will be published on protectohiochildren.com. Solon is now redlined as a school that is adopting this material and appears to be moving away from traditional curriculum. The outsourcing of this curriculum to a parent-teacher organization, keeping it effectively hidden from teachers, or from parents rather, is counter to creating and developing public trust, as some other parents have commented. I'm going to take the comments of one student and turn them into a discussion point, and it will be published. I imagine it will go live on Facebook and places like it. Last one we did had 135,000 comments on YouTube, so watch for that, please. Good day.
Catherine Catino, 33145 Rockford Drive. Mr. Bolden, when we spoke earlier this year about the DEI program, you shared with me that the PTA put this together with positive intent in mind and assured me and several other parents that critical race theory was not being taught. What you shared with us was encouraging, but during the last 2 board meetings, several members of the PTA stood up here and referred to their work as critical race theory. You stated that the materials were purposely withheld from the parents for the purpose of having, quote, organic conversations, but that we can always opt our kids out of the program. When I asked how can we opt our kids out if we don't know what is being taught first, you agreed with my point, and it sounds like that's changing now, so thank you. You stated that you reviewed and approved all the materials. So either the PTA snuck these definitions by you, or you approved these definitions to be taught, which means that you believe them to be facts. When Principal Short told me the teachings of Ibram Kendi were not being taught, one has to wonder, after seeing her June email recommending his book and handing out the glossary of anti-racist definitions. Either something nefarious is going on, or there's really bad communication between parents, the board, and administration. It breaks my heart that some in the community think that we don't want inclusion for our children, or that we don't want taught the bad and the ugly of our history. On the contrary, we are concerned that the last 53 years of history are being ignored, a time when many laws that fight systemic racism were implemented, such as the Federal Fair Housing Act, Civil Rights Act, Equal Employment Opportunity, and affirmative action. If these laws didn't work, then how is it that cities like Solon continue to become a more diverse community every year? We were also told by the PTA that the students love the lessons, not according to the high school D&I Survey 2.0 results from this spring. Board, I know that you've read the feedback, the student feedback, and you read for yourself the comments from the students where they said the messaging was confusing. It appeared to only blame white people for racism, and now all they can think about is labels. When I heard one speaker last time say, quote, "My goal is not to have them see color, but to have them understand what a person's color represents," end quote, I wasn't sure what that meant, but I can tell you that that is not my family's values. My goal is to teach my kids that color doesn't mean anything, and that is okay for us to disagree. It is not okay for the administration and the PTA to use public school to teach their values to other people's children. On the one hand, the PTA and the principal appear to be influenced by and referencing Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, for some of the materials. Why haven't we seen a recommendation for the book Woke Racism by John McWhorter? To be clear, we are not against inclusion, but we are very concerned about the lack of diversity of thought within these materials and that children are being taught racist ideas. Thank you.